Okie dokie. It should come up on a Zoom that we are live on Facebook now. And so we are. And I'm going to make sure I record this too. Hey, welcome, 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 Christine. I'm delighted to have you here all the way from the US. Today seems to be a US day for me. I've been here since 4 a.m. I've been on calls in the US, which is exciting. So thank you so much for being here. And I know that we titled today about how to get most out of your business. But before we do that, can you tell us a little bit about you, whereabouts you are in the States, and how you've come to be the negotiation that you are right now?
Well, first, Carmel, thank you very much for having me. It's an honor to be here. I loved meeting you at the next conference the other week with Monica Henderson. So thank you. So I'm here in sunny Southern California in Los Angeles, where it is a beautiful day today. And I moved here about 10 years ago, but I'm from North Central Montana, and I grew up in a tiny ranching community in a town of 550 people.
Oh,
And
wow.
after many years, I ultimately left, obviously, Montana, and I decided I'd always, if my mother would tell you that I always have loved negotiating. So I was one of those precocious children who always, said why or why not or how come. That was probably my favorite, was how come. And so I was always, and I think my mother always thought I was going to be an attorney, but I ended up getting my MBA and I had been working in international mergers and acquisitions and had
Okay.
started doing negotiation with senior executives in large telecommunications companies. And I found I
Yeah.
really, really liked it. But after working with Fortune 500s for a long time, I realized that those small country roots were really kind of something that mattered to me. Not necessarily working in a small country environment, but certainly working with smaller businesses. As I worked with all these Fortune 500, I saw how small companies were at a disadvantage when it
Yeah.
comes to their negotiation, because in a big company, everybody is a specialist, and in a small company, everybody is a generalist, and
Mm.
information is power. So information and the use of information that drives you to action, is even more powerful. And so big companies have an automatic advantage in that. And so I wanted to help companies level the playing field. So I launched Venn Negotiation as a way of providing both educational programs to small businesses and entrepreneurs to teach people how to be more effective negotiators. But we also provide consulting services where we actually act as a negotiator on behalf of many of our clients.
Wow, and such an amazing thing, because you're so right. Obviously the communication queen. I like communicating, but it isn't a natural thing. It just isn't. We like to think that, oh yeah, people can just ask and get, but there is a little power play and a bit of, give and take, and ways to get what you want. So can you give us a bit of an example for smaller businesses? What kind of are the most common problems that you come across, and how they can maybe, few tips.
Well, the first thing is actually to ask. So one of the things that I find that a lot of smaller companies do, especially when they're negotiating with bigger organizations, is they become so afraid of losing revenue that they don't ask for more of what they want. And
Yes.
they often start negotiating with themselves before they've ever even talked to their counterpart. And
Yeah.
so, the thing is, though, is that there's very rarely in business is there harm in asking. I mean,
Yeah.
business is not typically life or death unless you're working for the mafia. Then there's a different story, maybe. But typically speaking, it's not life or death. And
Yeah.
so asking for more, how you ask for it matters, but it's not likely to damage your relationship in a way that is going to cause you to lose all that revenue. So don't be afraid to ask for more of what you want. But to do that, you have to have clarity on what it is you are actually asking for. Because the other thing that I see a lot of small companies doing is they'll ask for something, but that's not really the ask. The ask is actually a little bit deeper than that, but they're just focusing on the surface because it's the easiest thing, and they're not digging deep enough into understanding having clarity around what it is that you want. And the reason why that's important is because as you dig deeper into understanding that clarity, you start to find trade-offs. You start to find those things that your counterpart may have that are really important to him or her that you can give away because they're not very important to you.
Right.
And so without that clarity, you don't have the opportunity to understand that. So
Yeah.
that's a big thing, is making sure you ask for more, and then having clarity on what it is that you're asking for. The one of the other big things is how you ask does matter. So making sure, as a communication queen, right? You totally get this, but there are different negotiation styles that we all use all the time, but we all have one that we kind of default to.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it doesn't work very well for us because it's kind of a style that we developed when we were 7. And while we may have, matured some to deal with that style or use that style in a slightly different way, some of the things that we did when we're 7, we're still kind of doing right now.
They're the imprint years. Yeah.
Yeah, well, nobody's taught us anything different. So how you ask really, really does matter.
Mm. I love where you say it's not life or death. And I think that's it is a big fear. And it's like the fear of public speaking. People are going, oh my God, I'd rather be anywhere than to get up and speak. And not even in a big public arena, but even in a meeting. So you're so right. The fear takes over. So the communication to what it is, it almost feels like a death. But I love when you say, like, being really clear on what you're asking for. How do you do that before you go in? Because I always go into a meeting with the outcome in mind. So I always kind of reverse engineer. And I love, we do have this conversation, what he's going to say and she's going to say, and then I'll say this. And it never turns out like that when you go into the room. But when you say to be really clear on what you're asking for, can you give us an example of that as to what somebody would normally ask for in that almost foot-stopping way? I want it because that's what we did when we were 7, versus what will be a more effective way to ask for it.
Well, one of the things that people often focus on, and I see this, and this is across the board in business, that I personally think is unfortunate, is people focus too much on price. And so people will get really uptight about a price without actually understanding what goes into getting to the price. So I often talk about how price is more often than not should be an outcome of a negotiation, not an input. So
Right.
a lot of salespeople and a lot of small business owners will go, okay, it's this price, but they can't explain to me what are all the things that go into creating that price. How do you, kind of what are your bare minimums? What do you then add on top of it? And how do the things that you're adding on top of it, what does that do to your price? And then how much margin do you need to make? What's your rationale behind the margin? Which of these things are important to you? Which things are not important? And so when you don't have understanding about that and you focus just on price, you lose a lot of opportunities. And what I see a lot of smaller businesses do is they assume too much cost in a relationship, so that while they may be generating revenue, they're not generating profit from a relationship, from a negotiated relationship. So I talk a lot about, one of the examples I'll use is I was negotiating a telecommunications contract for a company. And embedded in this contract, and this client was a hardware software company, but it was a smaller company. And embedded in that was language that you were going to do drug testing and certain types of background checks. So the salespeople didn't think this was any big issue. Nobody thought this was a big issue. But I go to the person who's, running kind of HR, and I said, do we do these? No, we don't do those. I was like, there's 4 pages of contract here that's all related to human resources stuff. And down to the details of what kind of drug tests you had to do. And I'm like, we live in California, right? where marijuana had been legalized. It's like, we can't do these drug tests because marijuana is legal in the at least in California at the time. And so understand that's an operational. So it's not like, so knowing that, so kind of looking at that information, it's like, could we do it? Yes. Is it going to cost us money to do it? Yes. Are we going to have to implement a new process? Yes. Do we have people to do this? Do we need people to do it? Yes. Do we have any or all of those things? And what is the cost related to building that capability? Because if I'm not recovering that capability in price, then I'm losing profit. I'm losing margin on that deal. And very often, and that when I went to the person who was running HR, she goes, I've never in my 20 years of doing this work had anybody tell me that there was anything in a sales contract about drug tests and background checks. And it was like, they're in all of these contracts. And so there are a lot of times, we get contracts as smaller business owners, and we freak out over them because they're the way they're written is just terrible. And they're, whereas heretofore people get confused and mostly people get intimidated by them.
Yes.
And so, but the reality is that contracts are just risk mitigation tools. And there are 5 types of risk that they manage, and only one is legal. One of the others is cash flow, profitability, operations, and strategy.
Yeah.
Your contracts cover all 5 of those things. 80% of it is business. So if you don't understand what's in that and in those agreements and that's impacting your business as a small business owner, you're incurring cost that you should not be incurring without capturing it in your price.
Yeah, that's really insightful, because you're right. As a small business owner, quite often, and a lot of people listening to this have probably started out being wearing every hat in the business, as we do, and they have maybe a few people working for them now, or maybe they're still at that stage. And you get a contract and you go, holy guacamole, and it's either you can be a little bit like me, I'm a bullet point queen, and I go, or some people will pour over it for hours, and it depends on what type of person you are, and that's all fine. But sometimes it is gobbledygook, and it is the legal jargon, and it does scare the living daylights out of you. So for somebody that's in that's tiny, small business, if they're going in to negotiate with somebody that's given them a contract like that, are you saying then that it'll be something like, hey, is that in there? Like if they're coming from the other side of it, if you get what I mean, how do they go back and negotiate with that company?
So I'm a complete proponent of transparency. So, right. I on my own podcast, I was interviewing somebody, the CEO of the company that owns the Philadelphia 76ers, which is an NBA sports team here in the United States. And he was talking to me about how in their suppliers, we were talking about how a company that size, because it's a bigger company, how they work with small businesses. And they had just done a review of their supplier base. And in that review, they found that the same suppliers were winning their business. And in that process, they also discovered that very few were minority owned, because the minority owned businesses were smaller. And part of it was that they couldn't adhere to some of these more rigid requirements that a larger organization could adhere to. So in that case, Harris Blitzer Sports Entertainment is the name of the company. They also own the New Jersey Devils, which is an NHL hockey team, and they own the Grammy Museum and a number of other brands. But in order to increase the number of minority owned businesses who are in their supply base, they've made modifications to how they evaluate those smaller organizations. And I
Yeah.
think that one of the challenges is that most small businesses, instead of being upfront about what their limitations are and emphasizing the value that they can create and the benefits that they bring, that they react and then they go, oh my God, I got to cut my price or I'm going to lose this. Well,
Yes.
guess what? If you're losing margin and you're not going to have a profitable relationship, you may as well lose the business anyway, because there's no benefit to you at the end of the
Yeah.
day.
Yeah. And that's really insightful that they're looking at it from their side, because that rarely happens. At the end of the day, all businesses are in it for profitability. Let's be honest about it. So the bigger the business. But I know that the smaller businesses, you're exactly right. They'll go, oh my God, I'll have to cut my price, and quite often work for little or no margin.
Mm-hmm.
But there is, again, that fear under it. If we're not seen to be working with these people that we've worked with before, what would happen? But I think it's the old adage of you have to drop something in order to pick something else up.
Well,
So
I
if
also,
you,
go
yes,
ahead.
sorry, go ahead. No,
Oh,
go
no, I
ahead.
was going to say, I talk a lot at times about how important it is to align yourself with businesses who are of similar size. Like I usually say, try to avoid doing business with companies that are more than 2 times your size, especially if as a supplier for suppliers, because they don't have incentive to grow with you, right? They have a model. If it's a big company, they have a model, they have margins that they have to hit, they have returns they have to hit for the stock market, et cetera. So if you're a smaller business, they're not going to be there. That large company isn't going to be there for you because you don't represent enough percentage or a large enough
Yes.
percentage of their revenue and their profit. So
Yeah.
always take care to look when you're trying to find suppliers for businesses, for supply partners that are going to grow with you and scale with you and be part of your long-term success.
Yeah, awesome. I'm laughing when you say, make sure they're no more than twice the size. So for some of the small business, that's just 2.
That's right. But guess
But
what? I guarantee you those exist.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, they do. But it's really insightful. And that's why I was so happy that you said yes to the interview, because quite often we get stuck in business in our own little world and we don't realize that there is more out there. There is open to negotiation. I love that you say transparency, but I find a lot of businesses, and I don't mean that they're dishonest. I don't mean that. Let's put that disclaimer out there. I just mean that they're not completely transparent. And again, it's usually a fear base. Because if I let you know my limitations as a business, then you're not going to want to hire me anyway. How do you find that in the real world? Is that the case? Do some people say, you know what, you're too small, other than obviously the big companies, but would they say, you've given me your limitations, so now I'm not going to do it? How would they balance the limitations with the benefits?
So I think one of the best ways to just answer this question is to tell people what negotiation is and is not.
Okay.
So negotiation is not a competition. Negotiation is a relationship, and you do not win in a relationship, right? So in my experience, and I've negotiated with almost half the Fortune 500 in 53 countries. And in my experience, that transparency, that ability to be upfront and straightforward about what's going to work and isn't going to work is absolutely in both parties' best interest. Because at the end of the day, if you're a small business and let's say you win a big, in technology where I've done a lot of work, they call marquee accounts, a logo account. You're gonna get that. You're gonna get that logo, right? And the number of times I've seen those marquee logo accounts destroy a small business that wasn't ready to service them, that wasn't ready to meet the demands of that big company. The road of my career is littered with companies who went out of business because they tried to do too much before they were even ready.
Quick.
Right.
Yes.
And that's not to say don't push and challenge yourself and all. That's not to say that at all. We're
Yes.
talking about negotiated relationships and making sure that when you're negotiating your relationships, that you build in that flexibility so that you can grow and you don't become held hostage by one large client where you don't have, 80%, 60%, 70, 80% of your revenue coming from one account.
Yes. So don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly.
And I love that you say it's not a competition, because quite often people use that language. They say, oh, we won that negotiation. They actually use that in a language. So it implies that it is a competition.
Mm-hmm.
And do you find people think that?
Yes. So when we talk negotiation styles, there are 4 different negotiation styles,
Okay.
and 2 of them are very, very competitive. One is super competitive, and the other one is just fairly competitive. And they represent about 65% of the negotiation population, especially in Westernized cultures. And the remaining 45% tend to be more collaborative. And, I often strike a difference between haggling for something where you have limited opportunities to move things around. There aren't a lot of variables in place,
Yes.
and negotiation. There's a study that was done. I can't remember if it was out of London or out of Denmark, but it talks about value. And when we negotiate, let's say we're negotiating for something that is, we're just going to call it 100. So whatever this 100 represents, the actual value that's available to everybody is 142. We actually leave 42% of value on the table in most negotiation because we don't explore the different opportunities to find it. We get so focused on dividing. So I use an egg as an example. So you've got 3 people who want an egg, right? So and the egg is raw. So how do you divide an egg amongst 3 people? Well, you can change its properties by boiling it and cutting it evenly in 3. If you smash it, then you just kind of get goo and it's not very useful. But if you take a pin and you poke a hole in it, you can drain the yolk and the white, and you can separate the yolk and the white. And now you have 3 completely different things that 3 different people could be negotiating for. Somebody could want the egg whites, somebody could want the yolk, and somebody could want the shell, right? And so negotiation is in part about finding how to create more value from a single thing. Haggling is about, dividing the egg in 3.
Yeah. Awesome. I love that.
And none of you had the value, that none of you got what you really wanted, because somebody just really did want the shell. So.
Yeah, I was going to say, because some people, their business will be exactly suited to that shell. It's not suited to the yolk. They just, that's stuff they would discard in actual fact.
Exactly.
Do it, don't let the business go. We'll take on the IT, even though we don't have an IT department, and do the whole lot. And I love that metaphor for it. That's awesome. And it's very important. We talk quite often in our courses and in our membership about a value frame, and being in control of your own value frame, and not just throwing out common words like, for example, a plumber. If you say a plumber and you've had a bad experience with a plumber, then you're going to say, oh my God, he came to my house, he overcharged me, and all I could see was his butt sticking out of the sink for half the time. Whereas, and I would imagine in negotiation that the value you bring has to be stated in a way that they will get the value, but it's not stated in a way that they will make assumptions on value that they've had before, if that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Cool.
I agree.
I love
100%. It. Yeah.
Awesome. So I can't believe we've been talking for so long already, because we're coming to the end. However, I want to ask you, so you've 2 different parts of your business, as in you teach people how to negotiate, and you also go in and negotiate for them. Can you give me a bit of an idea of who would be the best people to come in through your teaching them how to negotiate? So what kind of level would you be aiming at, so that if anyone's watching this and they want to connect with you, who would that be, and how could they connect with you on that side of it?
So from a training perspective, it's pretty broad, because our view is everybody negotiates all the time. And many people don't realize how important negotiation skills are until they've lost something important. And
Yeah.
I've seen people lose their homes, their partners, family members. I've just seen people lose so many things because they didn't negotiate effectively. So it really covers, so from a training perspective, it's really anybody, but we really love to focus with work with small businesses to help empower them to ask for more of what they want and then show them the tools and the techniques to negotiate for it. The same tools and techniques that the larger companies are leveraging on an everyday basis. And so if you are a small business and you are looking to move kind of upstream and expand your business and grow your revenue, and you've got customers or suppliers that are bigger than you, that you feel that they have more leverage, I would love to help you. I would love to talk to you more about how to improve your negotiation position in those situations and teach you how to get more.
Awesome. And I'm guessing that, of course, everything is online these days, so it's easily accessible online, no matter where you are. So
Yeah.
we'll make sure under the live that we actually put the link in, and we'll put this on YouTube and put the link in as well. And if there happens to be any of the bigger companies that would like your services of you negotiating for them, what kind of size company, or can you give us an indicator who that would be so that they know to contact you?
So those companies also they tend to be smaller companies. So I've just closed a couple of real estate deals, renegotiating actually a couple of commercial leases for companies that are around $1 million in size. So small retailers. But so yeah,
Nice.
it's really, if you have a contract that you feel that you don't like, that you're struggling to figure out how to get more out of it with your your counterpart, then I'd love to sit and talk to you about how you can do that. And they can set up a consultation with me to talk about that. And I will let you know. We work largely on a success fee. So
Right.
if we don't save you money or help you avoid cost, we don't get paid.
Oh, wow. That's really unusual. And that's awesome. Thank you for adding that. We didn't even know that. So what's the best way for them to contact you?
The best way is to go to our website at vennegotiation.com. And it looks weird because it has 3 N's in the middle and it has no S. So vennegotiation.com.
.com. Okay, cool. Well, we'll make sure we put the links underneath as well. So is there any last parting gifts or tip you'd like to give us before we finish up for today?
So we believe that everyone has the ability to be an excellent negotiator. You just need more training to get more confidence, to be comfortable asking for more of what you want. But you deserve more than what you think you do. So
Awesome. How beautiful. Christine, thank you so much for coming on the call with us. I'm sure we'll get you on again. And I look forward to keep connecting with you even further.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Carmel. I really appreciate it.
That's it. Bye. Thank you.